You thought you understood Eren Yeager's transformation. You watched him evolve from that screaming, revenge-driven kid into something darker, something colder. But what if I told you that the most crucial part of his journey wasn't shown in blood and titans? What if the real transformation happened in complete silence, in a space so intimate that even the cameras couldn't capture it? There's a moment that changes everything. Not when he sees his father's memories, not when he kisses Historia's hand, but something far more subtle. Something that happens between the frames, in the spaces where the anime can't reach. It's the moment when Eren's soul dies before his body ever does. Listen, everyone talks about Eren's development like it's this grand, cinematic arc. They point to his rage, his determination, his final plan, but they're missing the most devastating part of his story. The part that mirrors something millions of people experience, but never talk about. The spiritual collapse that comes before any rebirth. You see it first in his eyes, not the anger everyone expects, but something worse. Emptiness. That 1,000-yard stare that shows up in Season 4. The way he moves through conversations like he's sleepwalking. People called it character development. But it wasn't development at all. It was decomposition. Eren wasn't becoming someone new. He was watching everything he used to be die in real time. Think about it. This is a guy who spent his entire childhood with one burning purpose: kill every Titan, save humanity, be free. That rage, that determination, that crystal clear sense of right and wrong. It wasn't just motivation, it was his entire identity. Eren Yeager, the boy who would save the world. But then the basement happened, then the memories happened. Then the truth about Marley, about his father, about the cycle of hatred that stretched back generations. And suddenly, every single thing that made Eren who he was became irrelevant. The Titans weren't monsters. They were victims. The enemies weren't evil. They were just scared people protecting their own. His mother's death wasn't this grand injustice that needed avenging. It was just one tragedy in an endless chain of tragedies, each one justified by the one before it. And in that moment, Eren experienced what psychologists call ego death. Not the mystical, enlightening kind you read about in spiritual books. The brutal, devastating kind that strips away everything you thought you were and leaves you staring into an abyss. You know what happens when someone's entire worldview collapses overnight? They don't become wise. They don't find peace. They become hollow. That's what we're really watching in those final seasons. Not Eren choosing evil over good. We're watching someone whose soul has already died, whose sense of self has completely dissolved, trying to figure out how to keep existing in a world that no longer makes sense. The old Eren would have found another way. The old Eren would have fought against destiny, would have refused to accept that genocide was the only option. But the old Eren was dead. What remained was something else entirely. Something that moved through the world like a ghost, following the only path left that resembled purpose. This is where it gets really dark. Because when someone goes through this kind of spiritual collapse, when their ego dies, but their body keeps living, they enter this strange liminal space. They're not alive, but they're not dead either. They're just existing, going through the motions of being human while feeling completely disconnected from their own humanity. Sound familiar? It should, because this isn't just Eren's story. This is the story of spiritual awakening in its most brutal form. The kind that doesn't come with meditation retreats and Instagram quotes. The kind that comes with complete existential annihilation. But here's what most people miss about Eren's transformation. And this is crucial. The emptiness, the apparent lack of emotion, the mechanical way he moves through his final plan, that wasn't him becoming a monster. That was him trying to protect what little humanity he had left. When your soul dies but your body keeps living, you have two choices. You can either fall apart completely, or you can find a way to function without feeling. Eren chose the second option. He became a master of dissociation, separating his consciousness from his actions because the alternative was complete psychological collapse. That's why he seems so cold in those final conversations with Mikasa and Armin. It's not that he stopped caring. It's that caring would have destroyed him completely, so he learned to turn it off, to function purely on logic and necessity, because emotion had become too dangerous. You see this in how he talks about the rumbling. Not with passion, not with satisfaction, but with this strange, detached certainty, like someone describing the weather. Because for Eren, emotions had become a luxury he couldn't afford. They were too connected to the person he used to be, the person who died in that basement. This is what real spiritual death looks like. Not the romantic version where you emerge as some enlightened being. The version where everything that made you gets stripped away, and you have to figure out how to keep existing as something else entirely. And the most terrifying part, Eren was probably right. Given what he knew, given the constraints of his world, given the memories he carried, the rumbling probably was the only way to break the cycle. But by the time he reached that conclusion, he was no longer the person who could make that choice with his heart intact. That's the real tragedy of Attack on Titan. Not that Eren became evil, but that he became empty. Not that he chose genocide, but that by the time he made that choice, he was no longer capable of feeling the weight of it. The boy who wanted to be free ended up the most trapped of all. Trapped not by walls or titans, but by the death of his own soul. Moving through the world like a program executing code, following the only logic left that resembled purpose. But wait, there's something else. Something that happens in those final moments with Armin, when the mask finally slips and we see what's been hiding underneath all that emptiness. The child. The terrified, broken child who never got to grieve for the person he used to be. That's when you realize the most devastating truth of all. Eren's soul didn't die. It just went so deep underground that even he forgot it was there. And in those final moments, when the weight of everything he's done comes crashing down, you see it resurface. Raw, wounded, but still alive. Still human. That's the real power of Eren's story. It shows us that even in the depths of spiritual death, even when everything we think weird gets stripped away, something essential remains. Something that can't be killed, only buried. And sometimes, just sometimes, it finds its way back to the surface. But the question remains, was it worth it? Was the person who emerged from that spiritual death still Eren Yeager, or was he something else entirely? Wearing Eren's face? The answer might be more disturbing than you think.